I'm going to go ahead and get started. And so welcome everyone to this Financial Aid and Affording Grad School Zoom. We're very happy that you could be here. And I just wanted to remind you before we get started that we are recording this presentation for the folks who were interested but unavailable and want to view it later. So we will be posting this on our website within a couple of days. Joining us today are two go-to people on campus when it comes to finding ways to afford grad school. And Chris Trowbridge of the Financial Aid and Scholarship Office will first share some information, some grad specific financial aid basics. And then Dr. Matt Thomas, who is the coordinator for graduate fellowships and the grad coordinator for the political science program, will share some information about fellowship and award opportunities. And finally, I'll share a little bit of information on a couple of other avenues that might be worth considering. And then we'll open it up for some questions. So let's get started. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for being here. And would you like to share your screen and begin?
Sure, yeah, let me go ahead and do that.
Great.
Let me know if you can see this when it's shared. Does that look good?
Yes.
Okay, and then let me do this. There we go. So I'm going to save you guys all the hassle of having to look at me while I'm talking here, and save myself the hassle as well. So my name is Chris Trowbridge, and I'm a financial aid advisor here at CSU Chico, and I'm actually a Chico State Graduate Program alumnus as well. And today I'm going to go over some information, general financial aid information with you, and also some more tailored information that's kind of more specifically for students that are entering into a graduate program. And really, my main goal here today is to introduce you to some ways that graduate students can fund their education, and really encourage you to use the financial aid office as a resource. If you have any questions when I'm doing the presentation and they aren't of a personal nature, or you're not sharing too much, please feel free to go ahead and ask them in the chat, and I will answer them once the presentation is over. And if you have questions that are more specific, I would definitely encourage you to call our office and schedule an appointment either with myself or another financial aid advisor. And I'll have contact information on a slide at the end that you guys will be able to see. And then Rose pointed out something to me as well. I was going to put all of the links that I had, and I may still do it in the chat at the end. But if this is being recorded, you guys can always come back and re-access those links through the recording as well. So let's get started here. So really, in order to be eligible for financial aid, you have to start off by submitting either a FAFSA or California DREAM Act. And this is for federal or state aid. You're only going to submit one or the other. And in most all cases, students are going to be submitting a FAFSA. Students who aren't eligible to file a FAFSA and meet certain requirements under something called AB 540 may be eligible to file a California DREAM Act application. If you really don't know which one to submit, you can call our office and we can help you figure that out. But submitting a FAFSA or a California DREAM Act application, it allows our office to determine students' eligibility for the various types of federal and state financial aid that are out there. You're going to want to make sure that you file your FAFSA each and every year by March 2nd. And if you don't, then you run the risk of not receiving certain types of state aid, and specifically state university grant, that you might otherwise be eligible for. And I'll go over that and some of the standard aid types here in a minute. But before I do, we want to make sure that you submit your FAFSA correctly. There are 4 grad level questions on the FAFSA that I have here, and you can always go back and take a look at these again in the recording as well. And they seem really self-explanatory, but a lot of times these are answered incorrectly. And I think that what happens most often is that if you've been if you've submitted a FAFSA as an undergraduate and you're submitting a renewal FAFSA as a graduate student, It may be that these questions you don't go back and check, and so you end up answering them as if you were an undergraduate. And what happens when you do that is it can cause delays to your loans. Your loans won't disperse until we can go ahead and get them corrected. So just take a quick look at them. They're fairly self-explanatory, but I would encourage you, if you are submitting a renewal FAFSA, to go back and just make sure that little things like this are answered correctly. Okay, so when you fill out a FAFSA, all of the information that you enter in, and this includes student income, tax information, asset information, the number of family members in your household, the number of family members who are in college in your household, all of these different variables are run through a formula that's called the federal methodology. And the federal methodology ultimately outputs a number that we call the EFC. And EFC stands for Estimated Family Contribution, but it's kind of a misnomer. And in fact, they're planning on changing the name of it because it confuses a lot of people. If you have a 0 EFC, which is the lowest that it can be, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have no payments out of pocket. And conversely, if you have an EFC of 46,000, it doesn't mean that you're going to have to pay 46,000. Instead, the way that we use the EFC is as an index to gauge eligibility for different types of need-based aid. And in the case of graduate students, this usually means state university grant. Generally speaking, the lower your EFC is, the more likely you are to qualify for grant-based aid. And as an example, in order to qualify for state university grant, you have to have an EFC between 0 and 4,000. If it's higher than that, then you're not going to qualify for state university grant. And there are ways to bring your EFC down, which I'll get to a little bit later. But generally, the lower your EFC is, the better. So one thing to note, especially if you've submitted a FAFSA as an undergraduate and you're required to provide parent information because you are under 24, is that even if you're still under 24, graduate students are going to be independent for financial aid purposes, and you're not going to need to provide parent income on the FAFSA. And even if you choose to, it's not going to be used in the calculation that federal methodology that determines your aid eligibility. So yeah, for some people, it doesn't make a difference. For others, it's a fairly significant thing. Another thing that you might notice when you get your financial aid award is that your initial aid offer is a little more limited, or maybe a more positive way to spin it is it's a little more streamlined. The reality is that graduate students do have less federal and state aid options than undergraduate students. As a graduate student, you're not going to be eligible for things like Pell Grant or Middle Class Scholarship or Cal Grant or EOP, but it doesn't mean that there aren't options or more creative ways to help supplement funding your graduate degree, which is what we're going to kind of talk about. So what types of aid can you qualify for? And off the bat, I'm kind of going to be sticking to what the filling out the FAFSA helps you qualify for. So a typical financial aid award for a graduate student, at least as it's offered initially by our system, is going to consist of either a combination of state university grant and unsubsidized Stafford loan, or you might just be offered an unsubsidized Stafford loan. The state university grant is basically, it's grant aid, right? It's free money. And whether or not you're going to be offered the state university grant, again, is going to be dependent on your EFC, if it's between 0 and 4,000, and if you filed your FAFSA by that March 2nd deadline. So if you happen to file after that March 2nd deadline, it can be the case that you're not going to get state university grant. Although historically over the years, we've always extended that deadline out. And I think even to begin the academic year this year, we're already all the way out to July. If we have more state university grant to give, we will always go ahead and give it out to students. So the state university grant amount for graduate students is going to be $35.88 per semester. This is just about enough to cover tuition minus around $1,000. It covers the state university fee portion of tuition. And the unsubsidized Stafford loan, as it says right in the name, is a loan, meaning that it's something that you ultimately have to pay back. Unsubsidized loans do accrue interest while you're in school, whereas subsidized loans that you may have received as an undergraduate hadn't had the interest portion was subsidized until you actually entered repayment on it after you graduated. Unfortunately, right now, graduate students aren't eligible for subsidized loan, but there is a bill that's being passed through Congress that may change that. So hopefully it will. The maximum amount of unsubsidized Stafford loan that a student can receive during the academic school year is $20,500. Typically, students aren't offered the full $20,500 initially. I believe that our system packages about $15,000 initially. So if you need additional loan at that point, you'd have to submit a Stafford loan application, which can be found on the Financial Aid and Scholarship Office website under Forms and Applications. Or if you have trouble finding it, you can always call our office for assistance. Excuse me. So there are other aid opportunities that are kind of associated with the FAFSA application. One is something called Grad Plus loan. Again, this is a loan. The interest rate's a little bit higher than the unsubsidized loan, and it requires a separate application. So you're not going to be offered it just by virtue of having filled out the FAFSA, but you do have to have a FAFSA on file to qualify for it. Typically, students who are receiving Grad Plus loan have exhausted both, if they're state university grant eligible, they've exhausted their eligibility for that, and they have already received the full amount of unsubsidized loan, and they need something more. So sometimes they'll apply for this Grad Plus loan to fill the remaining unmet need that they have. So the other type of aid that you might see in there, although typically as a graduate student, you're going to need to request it, is something called work study. And work study, if you're not familiar with it, it provides students with an opportunity to earn money through a part-time job on campus. But basically, you'd have to apply and be hired in a work study position, and then the paycheck that you receive would essentially draw down on this, on the award that you get. And work study, it can be helpful as a graduate student sometimes, as departments can have work study funds that they can sometimes use to hire students to help grade papers or edit textbooks or all sorts of things. So if you're interested in work study and you don't end up seeing it in your award, you can contact our office, and it may be something very simple that we can go ahead and get in there for you. So there are also other aid options that don't require FAFSA up here. The alternative private loans they're kind of what we call loans of last resort. These are loans through, well, I'm not really supposed to mention names, but they're loans through private lenders that you can search on the internet and find, and the interest rates tend to be much higher than either of the other two federal loans, and they tend to have variable interest rates. So they can be helpful if the student isn't eligible for subsidized loan or Grad Plus for some reason. If you're in default on a previous loan, or there's some other issue that's preventing us from giving you other aid, alternative or private loans can be helpful in that regard. And then there are also scholarships, which we'll definitely go into in more detail here in a second. Okay, so just one concept just to talk about briefly. So there's something called cost of attendance, and it's important for a few reasons. When you receive your financial aid award letter, you might have noticed there was information in there regarding what we call the cost of attendance. And what's really important to know about it is that it's just an estimate of what it costs to attend CSU Chico. If you were to take a look at the budget items that are listed on the slide here, there's only two that would really show up on your account possibly as charges due, and for you guys possibly only one that are charges due that are charged by the university. The first would be tuition, and the amount that's listed there is an actual amount for full-time tuition. And the second would be if you happen to be on campus housing, and generally we tend to find that graduate students are less likely to be in on-campus housing. And so if you're on off-campus housing, it's not going to show up here as well. And so pretty much all of the amounts that you see listed aside from those two are going to be estimates. And so what you're actually going to pay for your books or for your personal expenses or even for your housing, it may be more or less than what's listed there. So there are ways to make the cost of attendance lower, by budgeting and doing other things, buying your books, at a reasonable price if you can. There are things that you can do to lower that. One other big thing to note about the cost of attendance that sometimes comes up with graduate students is that it is the upper limit to which we can award financial aid. So if your cost of attendance is $25,232, we can't award you more financial aid than that. So that's kind of the hard limit. And that, when I mention financial aid, I mean scholarships, loans, stipends actually get counted in that as well. There are ways that you can increase your budget. for required travel and some other things, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. And that can sometimes be helpful for people who have large stipends and want to be able to get, say, a state university grant as well. Okay, let's see. Okay, on to scholarships. So when it comes to scholarships, there are three broad categories that we generally talk about. We have Wildcat scholarships, which are scholarships that are filtered through CSU Chico and require that you submit the Wildcat scholarship application. There are departmental and program scholarships, which are also filtered through the university, but typically require a separate application to the Wildcat scholarship application. And then there are external scholarships, which, as the name suggests, are scholarships that are sourced from outside the university. And I believe that Dr. Thomas is going to be discussing some of the departmental and program scholarships in more detail, so I'll probably not speak about those too much. So with the Wildcat scholarships, the benefit of them is that there is one application that you submit. And when you submit that application, it puts you into consideration for all of the scholarships that get filtered through the university Wildcat scholarship process. The Wildcat scholarship application opens up January 2nd and closes February 15th every year. And this is prior to the start of the fall semester. So the Wildcat scholarship application for the upcoming 21-22 academic year is unfortunately long since closed. Obviously having the deadline as it is makes it difficult for students who are new, whether they're graduate students or freshmen or transfer students, to be aware of the deadline. And with grad students, it's possible that a lot of you haven't even decided to attend or even been admitted, although you don't have to be admitted to apply for the scholarship. You just have to have a Chico State ID number. Unfortunately though, the deadline sort of is what it is. There's been attempts to move it, but anytime it gets moved, it causes some other issue. So it's kind of going to stay where it is for now. But if you missed the Wildcat scholarship application this year, we definitely encourage you to apply for next year. So I wanted to show you guys, hopefully this works. Hopefully you can see that. I wanted to show you the scholarship webpage briefly so you can see some of the resources that it has available. And I'm not going to stay here for too long in the interest of time, but I want to encourage you guys to come back here and explore. And I'll put links to the webpage in the presentation, or you guys can come back and look at this again. Or if you want to screenshot it, whatever you want to do so that you remember where to go. So on this page, you're going to find all the information you need regarding the Wildcat scholarship application process. You'll notice that Wildcat scholarships are awarded based on a range of different funding criteria. Some are based on financial need, some are based on scholastic achievements, others have mixed funding criteria. So, often we get that asked the question whether they're merit scholarships or need, or ones that are based on need. It's a mix of all of them. And in fact, each scholarship that we have has slightly different funding criteria. You can actually also on here, which is pretty cool, you can view, if you click right here, you can view the scholarship opportunities and search them by entering keywords. There's also information on how to complete the required written statements back here, and letters of recommendation, as well as a list of frequently asked questions and other things. So anyway, I just want to encourage you guys to come back and take a look at that and peruse it for information, use it as a resource. Let's see, where am I? Okay, external scholarships. Okay, so as far as external scholarships go, there really are a multitude of opportunities that are out there. The real difficulty is finding them and doing the work to submit the applications on time and as requested by the funders. Because there's so many opportunities and they change so often, it's really pretty much impossible for our office to keep any sort of comprehensive catalog of all the various scholarships that are out there. But we do have links to several large search engines that are that you can use, and they allow you to enter in relevant information about yourself, and then they pull in scholarship opportunities that seem to be a good fit. We also have a link to our academic works, which is where I just was. And if you click on opportunities here, you can view the external. So you click here, and then if you click on external opportunities, oops, it should pull in all of the ones they're not part of the Wildcat scholarship process here. We also recommend that you search the web pages of professional associations or organizations associated with the career field that you plan to enter. So these organizations often have scholarships that they offer, or they have links to scholarship opportunities for students who are going to be pursuing a career in that field. So definitely do that. Another thing is when it comes to external scholarships, we recommend that you start your search early. Most scholarships are have application deadlines, and many are a lot earlier than you would think, kind of like ours. So you want to give yourself time to write your statement and collect letters of recommendation. Another big thing is to be persistent. The people who end up getting scholarships are the ones who just tend to keep putting in applications. So don't be discouraged if your scholarship search doesn't result in immediate success. I know from personal experience that it can be frustrating if you're sending in scholarship applications and not seeing any results, but typically it's the students, again, that are really persistent that reap the benefits. And sometimes it's in the form of a bunch of little scholarships, but those little scholarships definitely can add up and end up being quite a bit of money in the end. So as far as the department and programmatic scholarships, I am not going to go into this in too much detail, but I did want to point out with this link here that we do have a page dedicated to these opportunities on our webpage, so you can take a look and see all of them there as well. Okay. All right, so exceptional circumstances appeals. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier in terms of being able to lower your EFC potentially. One second. Okay, so when you fill out your FAFSA this year, you might have noticed that it asked you to provide your 2019 tax information, which, and here we are in the middle of 2021. So, it's almost 2.5 years gone. So even in the best of times, there's a possibility that a student's financial circumstances may have changed significantly from 2 years ago. But honestly, we're finding that it's even more the case now with everything that's going on with the pandemic. A lot of people lost their jobs, and sometimes that's a reason why they're coming back to school. So, if your income, as it was reported on the FAFSA, isn't reflective of what your current financial situation is, we do have this exceptional circumstances appeal process that allows you to submit information and documentation to our office so that we can recalculate your EFC and base your aid eligibility off your current financial situation rather than what it was 2 years ago. So I do have a link here that will that you'll be able to reaccess, and I can put it in the chat if you guys want me to. And the link will take you to a page that explains how to go about requesting an appeal. It has very detailed explanation about how you go into it, so I'm not going to go into it here. So, with these appeals, we have the ability not only to consider significant income loss, but we can also consider other circumstances such as loss of home or property, which unfortunately, with all the wildfires we're seeing, is more commonplace than it should be. We can consider high non-reimbursed medical expenses that might impact your ability to pay for college. We can look at non-reimbursed childcare expenses that are associated with your attendance at school or participation in school activities. We can look at support of an extended family member. So if you happen to be supporting a parent financially, or a brother or sister, we can sometimes take that into consideration. And then finally, we also have something called a travel budget adjustment. And this allows our office to actually increase your cost of attendance for required school-related transportation costs that are above and beyond what's already included in the budget. So this can be really useful if you happen to have a large stipend associated with your program and you want to increase your total aid package, or you want to be able to get the full amount of grant-based aid that you're not going to be able to get because of the cost of attendance limitation. So keep in mind that this particular appeal, it's not going to reduce your EFC and make you eligible for state university grant per se, but it increases your cost of attendance, which sometimes limits the total amount of aid that you can get. So in most cases, it tends to result in additional loan for people, but there are circumstances, like I mentioned, where it can result in grant-based aid or scholarship aid even. So let's see, we do have some appeals workshops that are coming up, and these are new, and they're going to be done via Zoom. And I unfortunately don't have access to the Zoom link at the moment, but I've shared the link where you will be able to find that information when it is available. They're coming up fairly soon, and I'm actually going to be participating in both of them. And these workshops are really helpful because oftentimes students don't know what documentation to submit or what we're looking for in these appeals. And so we get appeals that, requires us to reach out to students and, it's just an extra layer of contact that doesn't necessarily need to be there if we can explain to people what it is that we need up front. The other thing is sometimes people will turn things in and we have to deny the appeals, and then they come back and make an appointment and we're able to kind of open it back up. But the goal with this is to really streamline the process, and we're going to go over information in detail during these workshops. And, you know, if need be, we're going to have breakout rooms set up so that if you have specific questions about your situation, we can try to answer them there. And if we can't, then we will go ahead and set you up with an appointment with an advisor so that you can discuss your circumstance and see if it's appropriate for an appeal. One thing you do need to know about the appeals is they do take a lot of time to process. And right now we have more than we have ever had before. They have always taken between 8 to 12 weeks to process, unfortunately. And we are going to try to stick to that, even though we have a lot more to handle. But before they're completed, we really can't guarantee what the result will be or whether it's going to result in additional aid. So what that means is if you're submitting an appeal, you really need to sort of have a plan in place to make do with what you have currently, because it may be that after we complete the appeal, even if you have a reduced EFC, it may not result in additional grant eligibility, depending on what the circumstances. So, you know, just make sure that when you're submitting these, you have a plan to make do with what you have currently. Okay, let's see. I think I have one more. Sorry, this was this slide got kind of, it's sort of a sad looking slide. So, you know, successfully navigating the financial aid process, it can really be a challenge at times. And, you know, there are a few things that you can do to help ensure the process goes more smoothly. One of the big things that I would really recommend that you guys do is to meet with an academic advisor from your program to discuss what your academic plan is and try to plan out your courses. And then once you've done this, meet with a financial aid advisor. You can meet with me, meet with anyone else. I do tend to work with grad students more often. So if you can get an appointment with me, do so. Every student situation is unique. And the more information that we have about what you're planning on doing up front before you start your program, the better we can help you plan to make sure that you have the aid that you need to complete your program and that something doesn't happen in the middle or the end to your aid eligibility. So for example, there are some programs that have standalone certificate programs that are associated with them. And if you plan on pursuing these certificates, you really want to make sure you understand how to plan your classes so that you maintain your financial aid eligibility. So that would be a good reason to meet with an advisor. If you are taking prerequisite coursework, which always confuses me, but a whole nother thing. If you're taking prerequisite coursework as part of your graduate program, you'll want to understand how this might affect your financial aid as well, because there can be some issues there. And if you're in a higher units master's degree, you want to be aware of our maximum units policy, because you know, if you get above a certain number of units, you may have to turn in an appeal. Usually not a big deal, but it's good to know up front so it doesn't freak you out. The bottom line is that the more information that we have about your plan and when you're beginning it, the more that we can help you avoid any pitfalls in the future. Aside from that, there are a few other things. These are just general, you know, things that students should be aware of if you're new to the university. Just make sure that you're checking your Wildcat email and your student center often. These are the ways that our office is going to communicate with you, and other offices will communicate with you. If you have any holds or to-do list items, please take care of them. You know, usually there's redundancy here. So if you have a hold, you're going to get an email as well. Make sure that you review your financial aid award letter. If you don't have one yet, give us a call and we'll figure out what's going on. I mean, if you don't have a FAFSA, that's one reason, but sometimes there's other things that can be preventing us from getting you set up with aid. Let's see. And then just try to accept or decline your offers in a timely manner. I mean, we're well past the date where fee payment deadline was, but life is much easier if you have a financial aid award before the fee payment deadline and you've accepted it before. That way you don't have to make any payments out of pocket or get any emails from Student Financial Services telling you that your classes are going to be dropped. So let's see, well, actually, I'll go over that last here. So really the last thing that I just wanted to say, you know, is that try as we might, it's not always going to be possible for every student to be able to fund their graduate education without taking on some loan debt. Yeah, sometimes it is possible, but it's not always possible. So don't be discouraged if this is a case for you. I would encourage you to explore the career opportunities in your field of choice, and assuming that the earning potential is there, view a loan as an investment in yourself and your future earning potential. Just make sure that the amount of debt that you take on is going to be commensurate with what you hope to earn with your master's degree. So anyway, I'm going to leave you really quickly with this contact information. We are open 8 to 4, and right now we are doing in-person appointments, but it's limited. Some advisors aren't seeing people in person, some are. We do have phone or Zoom appointments available. You can always call our office at this number. We have student staff and staff that will answer the phone, and in most cases can answer all of the questions that you have. We also have our FinAid email. If you'd rather shoot an email off, we generally get back to people within a day. And then we have a live chat now that you can use to ask questions that we usually get back to you right away. So with all of that done, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it off to whoever is next. Matt.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen, but I'm also going to get this started. Let me retry this. Rose, can you share it instead? Because you have a setting and it's going to my second monitor.
Oh, darn, I'm wondering if that is happening to mine too. So, 1 second, I will see what I can.
Well, otherwise I can set up, I can change the slideshow setup. I don't think I have editing privileges here.
Okay, so let's see here. Yeah, I think it may be doing the same thing to me, but I'm gonna give it a try. So I will try to share this and see what it does.
Yours is doing the same thing.
Yeah, so, okay.
Let's, I'll just play around with it with this.
Okay.
But let me first say, thanks to Chris for all the information he shared. And I love coming to new grad student orientation. One of the reasons I love coming is to see all the excited faces. So if you happen to have the bandwidth and are comfortable turning on your cameras, turn on your cameras so I can see some of you. And so I can wave to you when I recognize you walking across campus. And Rose, are you putting it back on? It looks like it disappeared.
You know what? I did not put it back on. Would you like to try and share your screen one more time?
Let me do it. I think, okay, set up slideshow. Yeah, okay, I can do it from here. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm Matt Thomas. I'm in the Department of Political Science and Criminal Justice. I'm the graduate coordinator for the Political Science Master's Program, and I also coordinate certain fellowships that are implemented on our campus, some of which are kind of campus generated and others which come from the Chancellor's office. So the first one that I'll talk to you about is the Graduate Equity Fellowship Program. Graduate Equity Fellowship Program is unique to our campus. So all 23 CSUs have something similar to this, but there's a lot of variation, and the decisions about this program are made here on our campus, unlike the next two that I'll talk about. To apply for the Graduate Equity Fellowship, you need to identify some sort of educational disadvantage that you've faced in your life. That can be a whole bunch of different things. That can be that you went to a very, very rural school as a high school student, and that impacted your ability to learn. You could have had some sort of learning disability that was a challenge that you overcame. Perhaps you faced either racial or ethnic discrimination, and that was something that you overcame. Perhaps you went to a really, really urban school that was below par, and that was something that you overcame. The point is, there are a whole lot of different disadvantages that people face, and overcoming those disadvantages is the thing that makes you eligible to apply for grad equity. So every year we typically have 10 fellows per semester. They are paid at essentially 10 hours a week to work on research under the direction of a faculty mentor. It could be working with a faculty mentor on their research. It could be working on your own research. And we get together once a month, all of the different graduate equity fellowships, to talk about our experiences as graduate students at Chico State. And that is potentially an award that you can receive for up to 4 semesters. So that's one pot of money that is a fairly sizable amount of money that you could be eligible for if you applied and were selected for it. In addition, we have the pre-doctoral scholarship program. So all of you are just starting a master's program. You may not be quite on board with thinking about what you want to do after this degree. You're worried about the degree that's right in front of you. But if you are thinking, boy, I'd really like to go on and I'd like to get a doctorate at some point, then the pre-doc is a fantastic program for that. This is one of the ones that is awarded out of the Chancellor's office, but you apply through our campus. So you'd meet with me, we'd talk about your different essays that you'd be writing and your plan. And if you are awarded a pre-doc, then you get up to $3,000 to visit campuses, to apply to schools, to take the GREs, to go to academic conferences, or to join academic associations. So pre-doc can be a really important resource for exploring and then applying to doctoral programs. In addition, it gives you the opportunity to participate in a summer program where you serve as an intern at one of up to pretty much any Research One PhD granting institutions in the United States. So you have a lot of chances to utilize that summer internship. It pays for your travel to the location, pays for room and board, and it provides you a stipend as well. Okay, so let's talk about the next one. Is if you did take that next step and applied to and were accepted in a doctoral program, I also coordinate the CDIP program, the Chancellor's Doctoral Incentive Program. And with CDIP, if you are in a doctoral program, you can take up to $30,000 in very low interest loans through the Chancellor's office. You can take up to $10,000 a year. So over 3 years, you could take the $30,000 or you could take out less. If you're accepted into the program, you don't have to take out any. So you could very well just have it there for emergencies. But if you return after a doctoral program and teach at a CSU, the entire loan is forgiven at 20% a year for 5 years. So at the end of 5 years, you owe nothing on this and have never made any payments. So that's if you come back and are tenure track at a CSU. And then the fourth one is through the Office of Graduate Studies, and recognizing that, you know, this isn't going to cover everything if you're going to, say, an academic conference, but as you get to know faculty in your program, they may encourage you to present research either with them or your own research at an academic conference. And the Office of Graduate Studies has up to $200 grants for either going to conference presentations, or let's say that you need to go to an archive down in Southern California. You may be able to get a grant for that travel. So those are ones that they begin funding, and it's just funded on a availability basis until the money runs out. And then Chris mentioned the departmental scholarships, and he had the link. So I would go back and check with his presentation for that link to discipline specific scholarships. And, you know, it never hurts to ask the department chair, for instance, or the graduate coordinator, are there scholarships for our department in particular, or our program in particular? We don't have a ton, but it's always good to ask. And then on-campus employment. So Chris talked a little bit about, you know, you might have work study funding that could get you employment on our campus. We also have a number of teaching or teaching associate positions. So in my department, we typically have somewhere between 7 and 8 teaching assistants every semester. And in my department, we don't just hire people from the political science MA program. We hire from the Master's in Public Administration. We've hired in the past from the social science program, from history, from communications. So if you happen to have a solid background in, say, Introduction to American Government as a class, you may be a viable teaching associate candidate in my department. And there are other departments where that can also be true. So even if your department doesn't have teaching associate positions, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look around and see whether there are other possibilities out there for you. And these links, which Rose, I'm assuming we'll be able to share these slides with people afterwards. So you have the links to where you can see where different announcements would be. CSE, Chico State Enterprises, certainly has opportunities as well for grad students. So look around for these teaching and research assistantships that won't necessarily be scholarships. You're going to be working for your money, but you're going to be working in an area that you very well might greatly enjoy. I know the vast majority of people who serve as TAs in my department get a huge amount out of that experience, and it helps them decide about future paths. Are they interested in teaching at the university level or not? So that's a few of the programs that I wanted to highlight for everybody. And I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Rose, but I'll flip to the next slide for you.
Thank you. Okay, and I just wanted to let everybody know about a fairly new program to campus. It was a grant program, and the grant was written by Sharon Barrios, the Dean of Graduate Studies, and it also, one of the co-directors is the Dean of Undergraduate Studies. And the Adelante post-baccalaureate pipeline program does hire graduate students for several positions. And the Adelante program has as its core mission to support Latinx and low-income students, underserved students in general, to explore, prepare for, and apply to and attain graduate degrees and teaching credentials. And as part of that, they have a Wayfinders mentorship program where graduate students can apply to be a mentor and work in a paid position as a mentor to some undergraduate sophomores, juniors, and seniors, so that they are supporting them in hubs of about 10 students. And they those students participate in guided career exploration, workshops, speaker events, etc. And so this is helping those undergrads to know a little bit more about graduate school and their postgraduate possibilities. And it also provides some funding for some graduate students to help those students get through grad school. So that's one of the programs. Another program is the Adelante Graduate Student Outreach Ambassadors Program. And that is where students do outreach to undergrads, and they go into classes, talk about it with, in undergrad courses, but they also plan workshops that are often offered just like this one and then posted online. Speaker events, give presentations about their experience in graduate school to help other students who are undergrads consider and have more information for that. And that is also paid positions and or stipends. And then the third part of the Adelante program is the Summer Researchers Program. And that allows undergrads, but also grad students can apply to do faculty mentored research. And that can provide about $4,800 in 2 stipends for the summer. And that's a great program where it allows you to have some experience doing the research in your area of interest with a faculty mentor and get some money to do that over the summer. And then the other program that I wanted to mention was the Student Awards for Research and Creativity. And this is a Provost's Award that folks can apply for. And once again, this is open to undergrads and graduate students, but the graduate students are eligible for a lot bigger stipend. So their awards are up to $1,700 for fall or spring semester, and up to $5,000 for the summer. And one thing I'll mention about the Adelante program is that preference goes to folks who are in that Latinx or underserved or low income group. So if you've had, it's sort of similar to the grad equity program, where if you've had some kinds of disadvantages that you've had to overcome, you're more likely to be able to get into that program. And the Student Awards for Research and Creativity, the SARC Awards, those are pretty much anybody can apply. So they don't have the same kind of criteria. And I think you do have to have maybe a 3.5 grade point average, but there are also opportunities to kind of explain if your GPA isn't quite there, you can still apply. So it's a similar program to the Summer Researchers Program, where you get, you get to do faculty mentored research. It can also pay for some things other than just the research. Like if you need to travel somewhere to do your research. And in that respect, it's a little bit like our grad studies award, where we have that student research and conference award, where we can pay for somebody to go to do some research at another institution. We can help with the travel there. And this is another place where you might be able to get that type of funding. So those are basically all the things that we wanted to talk about. And now we would like to open it up for questions from you all. And I'll just mention that Chris has put lots of great links in the chat, and but we are longing to hear any questions you might have. So please feel free to speak up.
How are all of you doing? Are you getting excited about starting graduate school next week?
And I have everybody on mute, so you're going to have to unmute yourself if you want to say something. So.
We got a thumbs up from Daisy. You do know that you're going to have to talk in your graduate seminars, right?
Yes. I got
Not-
so used to it though with all these virtual classes.
And I wasn't just referring to you, Daisy. All of you are going to have to speak up in your grad classes.
So
I'm
not
very
everybody
excited,
is like
thank
me.
you.
let's hear that, Rima, again.
I am very much looking forward to next week. It's a big step, so very excited. And thank you guys for the support you're offering through these sorts of sessions. It's very helpful.
So glad. Welcome.
Pretty excited too, as I just finished my undergrad this May and I'm going straight to grad school. So
Good for you. How many of you are going straight into grad school? We know Daisy is. The rest of you are returning?
Yeah, I finished my undergrad almost 10 years ago. So here we go.
That's okay. Well, our programs work for both right out of undergrad and for people who have lots of experience. I teach in both the Master's in Political Science and the Master's in Public Administration. And in our Master's in Public Administration program, we have a fantastic mix of both what we call pre-service, or people who've graduated relatively recently, and in-service, people who have experience in public administration. And it makes for fascinating seminars to have people who are out there in the field and have some real world experience. So Rima, you'll be bringing that into the classroom with you.
You know, I was curious, there aren't any credential students here, are there? This is all folks who are going to be in a master's program, correct?
I believe so.
Okay, cool. Because there is some different information that I would have for credential students, and hopefully, yeah. So if you are a credential student, reach out to me, because some of that information I provided you wouldn't necessarily be as relevant. So.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank Chris Trowbridge and Dr. Matt Thomas for your very helpful information. Lots of information, and we will get it up on our website so that folks can refer back to it, because it is a lot of information, but so helpful. So I appreciate it.